Okay, so get this right. Imagine you're stuck in a marriage, but like legally, you were never even married. Wild, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what the Indian Supreme Court had to deal with recently.
Yeah.
And this whole thing, it has massive implications when it comes to alimony law. Huge.
You know, it's fascinating how this case really throws a wrench into this whole idea of void marriages. Like, what does that even mean under Indian law?
Right.
So you see, in India, right, you've got these marriages that are basically considered invalid right from the start. Like, poof, never happened. A bigamous marriage would be a classic example.
So basically, it's like the law is saying, nope, that marriage never really existed.
Gotcha. Exactly.
Okay, but here's where my brain starts to melt a little. What happens to financial support, like alimony, when one of these void marriages gets, well, voided? Does someone still have to pay up?
See, you're getting right to the heart of it. That's the million-dollar question the court had to wrestle with in Sukhdev Singh v. Sukhbir Kaur. And honestly, the answer might just surprise you.
Spill it. What's the deal with this Sukhdev Singh case?
Okay, so in Sukhdev Singh, you've got this husband who's trying to wiggle out of paying alimony after the court declared his marriage void. His argument. Basically, hey, the marriage wasn't even real, so why should I pay alimony?
I mean, on the surface, it does kind of make sense, right?
Yeah, at first glance, maybe. But legally speaking, it's not that simple.
I bet. So what made this case so complicated?
Well, you see, there were actually previous Supreme Court rulings on similar cases that went in completely opposite directions.
Oh, so they were contradicting each other.
Exactly. Some cases, like Chandahan v. Jawaharlal Dewan, were totally pro-maintenance. But then you have others, like Yamunabai Anantro Adhav v. Anantro Shivra Madhav, where the court basically said, nope, no alimony if the marriage was void.
Ah, okay, so that's what landed this case in the Supreme Court's lap.
Exactly. They had to sort this whole mess out.
No easy feat. So what were the big legal questions they had to tackle?
All right, so there were two main issues. First, they had to figure out if Section 25 of the Hindu Marriage Act, you know, the part about alimony, even applied to void marriages in the first place.
Okay, I'm following.
And second, they had to decide if someone could get interim maintenance, you know, like temporary support during the court battle, even if the marriage ends up being declared void.
Gotcha. So let's break that down. The first question about Section 25 kind of hinges on this phrase, at the time of passing any decree. Did the court think that included decrees that basically nullified a marriage?
Well, here's where it gets interesting. The court basically decided that any decree means any decree, and that includes ones that say this marriage never happened. They were like, look, if a decree changes your marital status, you still have the right to claim maintenance. Bam.
Whoa. That's a pretty big deal, right? It means that even if a marriage gets tossed out, that doesn't automatically mean alimony is off the table.
Precisely.
Okay, then what about the second question about that interim maintenance thing?
Yes. The court was very clear on that, too. They said, even if the marriage is later found to be void, a spouse can absolutely go for interim maintenance under Section 24 of the Act.
Okay, but there's got to be a catch, right?
Well, yeah, there is one. To get that interim support, you have to prove that you don't have any income of your own. It's like the court was saying, we can't just leave someone hanging out to dry financially while they're fighting their legal battles.
It sounds like the court was super focused on making sure things were fair for everyone involved, no matter what.
That's exactly it. Fairness was a big theme throughout this whole decision.
I mean, this is all super interesting, but I bet some people listening are thinking, hold on, how does this Indian court case affect me?
Yeah, I can see how someone might think that. But trust me, the implications of this ruling could be huge, and not just in India. We're talking about potential global ripples here.
Wait, seriously? You're saying this one decision could have effects around the world?
It's definitely possible. Think about it. The Sukhdev Singh case raises some really fundamental questions about financial support in complicated relationships, like where do you draw the line between legal technicalities and basic human needs? Those are questions that people grapple with everywhere, not just in India.
I never thought about it like that. So are you saying that other countries might look at this ruling and think, hey, maybe we need to tweak our own laws about alimony?
Exactly. This could be a blueprint for how courts in other countries handle tricky cases like this. It's like a wake-up call saying, hey, legal systems everywhere need to keep up with the times and make sure people are protected, especially when things get messy.
It's like the court's saying, look, we get it, life happens, relationships break down, and sometimes those relationships weren't even legally valid in the first place. But that doesn't mean we can just ignore the fact that some people might be left financially vulnerable.
That's a perfect way to put it. And that message, it resonates far beyond India's borders. It's a universal message about compassion and fairness.
I'm starting to see why this case is such a big deal. But hold on. Could it actually lead to changes in laws in other countries, like real legal reform?
Absolutely. Imagine lawmakers in other countries looking at this decision and saying, hold on, are our laws actually doing enough to protect vulnerable people? Are we striking the right balance between following the legal rules and showing compassion?
So you're saying this one court case in India could set off a chain reaction around the world?
That's the power of a landmark legal ruling. It doesn't just settle one specific dispute. It can spark bigger conversations about justice and how we can make sure our laws are truly serving the people they're supposed to protect.
Wow, it's amazing to think about how one case can have such a ripple effect.
It really is. And that's what makes studying law so fascinating. It's constantly evolving, and cases like Sukhdev Singh v. Sukhbir Kaur are often the catalyst for that evolution. They force us to confront difficult realities and rethink old assumptions about how things should be.
This whole thing has got me thinking about other situations where relationships might not technically qualify as marriage, but there's still a clear need for financial support. Could this ruling have implications there too? Like, what about couples who are together for years but never officially tied the knot?
That's a brilliant question, and I bet legal experts around the world are already debating it. This ruling could definitely influence how courts handle things like alimony cases, where someone is seeking financial support after a long-term unmarried relationship ends.
So it's not just about void marriages. It's about a broader recognition that financial vulnerability can exist in all kinds of relationships, and the law needs to adapt to that.
Exactly. And that's what makes this ruling so monumental. It's not just about Indian law. It's about a fundamental shift in how we think about the intersection of law, relationships, and human dignity.
This whole conversation has left me feeling a bit overwhelmed, but in a good way. It's like this one case has opened up a whole new world of possibilities when it comes to family law.
I love that analogy, and that's what makes this whole field so captivating. Every legal decision has the potential to unlock new questions, new challenges, and new paths towards a more just and compassionate world.
This is seriously making me consider law school. Or maybe I'll just stick to listening to the deep dive.
I definitely recommend the latter.
So what do you think, dear listeners? Does this ruling give you hope for the future of family law? Does it make you question your own assumptions about relationships, legal recognition, and financial support? We'll leave you with those thought-provoking questions as we wrap up this part of our deep dive.
And remember, the conversation doesn't stop here. Keep exploring these issues, debating them respectfully, and advocating for legal systems that prioritize both justice and compassion.
Beautifully said. Now, before we get too carried away with the positive vibes, we need to take a step back and look at the potential downsides of this ruling. Are there any unintended consequences we need to be aware of? Could this decision actually make things worse for some people?
That's a crucial point, and one that often gets overlooked in the excitement of a landmark decision. Whenever you change the rules of the game, you always have to think about how people might try to game the system.
So you're saying there's a chance some folks might try to take advantage of this ruling for their own personal gain.
Exactly. One concern that always comes up with alimony is the potential for abuse. Like, could this ruling make it easier for someone to basically enter into a void marriage just to try and cash in on alimony later? That's a question we can't ignore.
Yikes, that's a scary thought. The legal system is supposed to protect people, but we all know it's not perfect.
Right. And on top of that, there's the question of how this ruling will impact the Indian courts, which are already dealing with a huge backlog of cases. Granting alimony in more situations could lead to a surge in new cases, which means even longer delays and more frustration for everyone involved.
More bureaucracy and red tape. Nobody wants that.
It's a real concern. We can't just focus on the ideal outcome. We have to think about the practical realities too.
It sounds like this ruling, while potentially groundbreaking, also comes with some real challenges that will need to be addressed. It's not as simple as just saying everyone deserves financial support and calling it a day.
Exactly. It's a delicate balancing act. We have to protect individual rights, make sure things are fair, uphold the law, and make sure the legal system can actually function effectively in the real world. It's a lot to juggle.
It's a good reminder that even the most well-intentioned legal decisions can have unexpected ripple effects. Sometimes those effects are positive, but sometimes they can be negative too.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to keep having conversations like this, monitoring the impact of the ruling, and being willing to make adjustments along the way. There's no one-size-fits-all solution here.
It seems like the conversation about this ruling is just getting started.
That's the beauty of law, isn't it? It's constantly evolving, and cases like Sukhdev Singh v. Sukhbir Kaur are often the catalysts for that evolution. They force us to confront difficult realities and rethink old assumptions about how things should be.
Well said. So, to wrap things up, we've explored the potential benefits and drawbacks of this landmark ruling, talked about its possible global impact, and touched on some of the long-term challenges that lie ahead. We've unpacked the legal maze, wrestled with the moral dilemmas, and glimpsed the human stories at the heart of this whole issue.
We've taken a deep dive into the complexities of alimony, void marriages, and the ever-changing landscape of family law, not just in India, but potentially around the world.
Hopefully this deep dive has left you with more questions than answers, because that's the beauty of knowledge, right? It's a journey, not a destination.
And we're thrilled to have you along for the ride. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those brains buzzing.
Until next time, dear listener, when we'll dive into another fascinating topic. See you then.
It's like the court saying, hey, we get it. Life happens, right?
Yeah.
Relationships fall apart, and sometimes they were never even real to begin with. But that doesn't mean we can just turn a blind eye to the fact that some people might end up in a really tough spot financially.
Right.
That's a perfect way to put it. And that message, it goes way beyond India. You know, it speaks to this universal idea of compassion and fairness.
Absolutely. Okay, but I'm still kind of stuck on this idea that this ruling could actually change laws in other countries. Like real legal reform. Could that really happen?
I think so, yeah, absolutely. Imagine this, right? You've got lawmakers in other countries looking at this decision and they're saying to themselves, hold on a sec. Are our laws actually doing enough to protect the people who need it most? Are we striking the right balance between following the letter of the law and actually showing some compassion, you know?
It's almost like this one court case in India could trigger a whole chain reaction around the world.
Exactly. That's the incredible power of a landmark ruling like this. It doesn't just settle one specific dispute. It sparks these much bigger conversations about justice and how we can make sure our legal systems are truly serving the people they're designed to protect.
It's mind-blowing to think that one case can have such a huge ripple effect.
It really is. And that's one of the things that makes studying law so fascinating. You know, it's always evolving. And cases like Sukhdev Singh v. Sukhbir Kaur are often the things that really push that evolution forward. They make us confront these tough realities and rethink a lot of our old assumptions about how things should work.
This whole conversation has got me thinking about other situations where, you know, a relationship might not technically qualify as a marriage in the eyes of the law, but there's still a clear need for financial support. Like, what about couples who've been together for years but never actually made it official? Could this ruling have any impact on those kinds of situations?
That's such a great question. I bet you legal experts all over the world are already having heated debates about this as we speak. This ruling could absolutely have a big influence on how courts handle things like alimony cases. You know, those are the cases where someone is seeking financial support after a long-term relationship ends, even if they were never legally married.
So it's not just about void marriages then, is it? It's about acknowledging that financial vulnerability can happen in any type of relationship, really, and that maybe the law needs to catch up with that reality.
You got it. That's exactly what makes this ruling so monumental. It's not just about Indian law. It's about a fundamental shift in how we think about the relationship between the law, relationships of all kinds, and human dignity.
You know, after hearing all of this, I'm honestly feeling a little bit overwhelmed, but in a good way. It's like this one case has opened up a whole universe of new possibilities for family law.
I love that. And that's exactly what makes this whole area of law so captivating. Every legal decision has the potential to unlock new questions, new challenges, and new paths towards creating a more just and compassionate world.
It's actually making me think about going to law school. Or maybe I should just stick to listening to the deep dive.
I definitely recommend sticking with the deep dive.
So, what are your thoughts, listeners? Does this ruling give you a sense of hope for the future of family law? Does it make you rethink your own assumptions about relationships, legal recognition, and financial support? We'll leave those questions with you as we wrap up this part of our deep dive.
And remember, the conversation doesn't have to end here. Keep exploring these issues, keep debating them respectfully, and keep pushing for legal systems that prioritize both justice and compassion.
Well said. Now, before we get too carried away with all the positive vibes, we need to take a step back and consider the potential downsides of this ruling too. Are there any unintended consequences we need to be aware of? Could this decision actually end up hurting some people?
That's a really important point, and it's something that often gets lost in all the excitement when a big decision like this comes out. You know, whenever you change the rules, there's always a chance that some people will try to find ways to, well, bend those rules to their advantage.
You're saying that some people might try to use this ruling to, game the system?
Exactly. One of the big concerns with alimony has always been the potential for abuse. Could this ruling make it easier for someone to get into a marriage that they know is invalid just so they can try to get alimony later on? That's something we definitely need to think about.
Yeah, that's a bit unsettling. It's like the legal system's supposed to help people, but it's not always foolproof, is it?
Right. And then there's the whole question of how this is all going to impact the courts in India, which, as you know, are already swamped with cases. Adding alimony claims on top of everything else could lead to even more delays and backlogs, which just makes things more frustrating for everyone involved.
Ugh, nobody wants more red tape and bureaucracy.
Yeah.
That just makes everything slower and more complicated.
Exactly. We have to think about the practical side of things, too, not just the ideal outcome.
So it sounds like this ruling, while it could be a really positive step forward, also comes with some potential pitfalls and challenges. It's not as simple as just saying everyone deserves financial support and leaving it at that.
You hit the nail on the head. It's all about balance. You know, we need to protect individual rights, make sure things are fair, uphold the law, and at the same time, make sure that the legal system can actually function effectively. It's a lot to juggle.
It definitely makes you realize that even when the courts try to do the right thing, there can be unintended consequences, both good and bad.
For sure. And that's exactly why we need to keep talking about these issues, Keep an eye on how this ruling plays out in the real world and be ready to make adjustments as needed. It's a process, not a one-and-done solution.
It seems like this conversation about the ruling is just getting started.
And that's what's so great about the law. It's always evolving, and cases like this one are often the sparks that ignite that evolution. It forces us to confront tough questions and re-examine our assumptions about how things should work.
Well said. So, to wrap things up today, we've explored the potential upsides and downsides of this landmark Supreme Court ruling, talked about its potential impact on a global scale, and touched on some of the long-term challenges that might lie ahead. We've really tried to unpack the legal complexities, the ethical dilemmas, and the very human stories that are at the heart of this whole issue.
It's been a true deep dive into the world of alimony, void marriages, and the ever-changing landscape of family law. It's something that affects people all over the world, not just in India.
And hopefully this deep dive has left you with more questions than answers, because that's what real learning is all about, right? It's a journey, not a destination.
We're so glad you joined us on this journey. We encourage you to keep exploring these issues, keep asking those tough questions, and never stop challenging your own assumptions.
Beautifully said. Until next time, dear listeners, when we'll dive into another fascinating and thought-provoking topic. We'll see you then.